right? Fortunately, we have the Second Amendment that's being strengthened every day thanks to the likes of
Careful.
FPC and Gun Owners of America. What?
Had a couple of recent decisions that did not go our way.
Yeah, I think we kind of expected that. If I'm thinking of the same ones, unless I didn't hear about them, like it was
I haven't read
like
the
the
decisions. It was
Oregon.
in the last couple of that came out in the last couple of days. I just haven't had time. I've been too
Yeah, I
busy with
mean,
stuff.
it was reading the stuff from FPC. It was sort of along the lines of this, judge ruled against their favor. Kind of a crazy argument made by the judge. That's kind of my opinion, though it correlates with
Happens a lot
FPC's.
in
And they're like, yeah, we kind of
on the
expected
West
this.
Coast.
Yep,
Yeah,
kind of expected this. Now we appeal.
right.
And it's given they're referencing the Bruin case, there's strong likelihood that, I mean, a lot of this is blatantly misinterpreting Bruin decision, like
Yeah,
stretching hard to try to justify it. So,
yeah, but they don't even pretend like they give a crap.
no,
There's too many activist judges out there that just are not. This is our broken judicial system. So whatever.
well,
Anyways,
fortunately, though, I think that can be the Supreme Court can actually reel it in very relatively easily by just saying, no, you've got this wrong, fix it, without having to listen to arguments.
yeah,
Um, but I could be wrong on that. But in the light of this stuff, there's a lot of people talking about whether they think people on the left think the Second Amendment is it's a ridiculous interpretation to allow people to have machine guns. People more on the right side of things, like you and I, think that the Second Amendment is pretty clear. Right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and that pretty much includes everything.
yeah. See, what you didn't understand is they meant the arms of bears. Like, so you have to actually go out and kill a bear, and then you can keep his arms, not not being able to just keep armaments.
Don't
I'm
don't
just
think
kidding. No, I'm
that's
just.
don't think that's
I
true.
don't. Yeah, that's not the interpretation I
But in
had.
order
Yeah.
to kill bears, I would need no.
Well,
I
you
think
would. I mean, I wouldn't, but
you wouldn't. You just need a Bowie knife, long
I
stick
mean,
maybe.
that's how they did it in the old days, bro. Like,
Yeah, lots of long sticks.
mm-hmm.
And
I mean, they kill woolly mammoths and elephants and stuff like
oh
that, and
yeah,
you can handle a bear. It's cool.
the survival rate though of people bear hunting was not great.
Eh, you know,
Um,
look,
but
let me explain this. Some of you may be killed, and that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make. You're welcome.
yeah, that sounds about right.
You know,
But given that is how I think there's the correct reading of the Second Amendment, there is some discussion about whether there should be amendments to that to handle more contemporary issues.
amendments to that or limitations placed on that?
Well, considering that I'm not sure there'd
Because
be limitations on it, but I think they would have to be. I think you probably have to amend the Constitution to get some of that. You don't think so? You think it exists within the reading of the Constitution?
no, I think it's already been done. They've been doing it for. I mean, when's the NFA?
The
When was that
constitutionality of the
act?
NFA has never been challenged.
I well, it might get challenged soon, but no, I mean like
Yep.
there's plenty of examples that we can look to of where rights have been curtailed and it's been upheld. So like this is a normal thing. There's been infringements on rights, uh, and actually, I mean like if you look at it, you know, this is something that you could make the argument that felons aren't allowed to own firearms at this point.
Sure.
And I don't recall seeing anywhere in the Second Amendment that, oh, everybody has the right to bear arms unless you commit a felony and then we can restrict that.
Well, I think there's pretty good precedent suggesting that you can lose your rights through due process.
I, I mean, maybe. I don't like precedent anyway. Um,
Well,
I'm not a fan of precedent, but I get
That's
what
a
you're
whole other
saying.
discussion. I mean, it's more. I
I
don't
get
even know
it,
if it's.
but I mean, like, okay, so what does that mean, right? Where do you draw that line? And that has not been legislated. And I think that I'm a strong believer that if you want to change it, if you want to do any kind of amendments, you actually have to amend the Constitution to change the Second Amendment. Like if you want to edit it, then you need to do that.
Yep.
Beyond that, then currently what it says is zero infringements, zero infringements.
Yep. No, I'm inclined to agree on that. But
So,
I mean, it's the way I see it is. Well, I guess what do you think the purpose? How would you state the purpose of the Second Amendment is in your eyes?
I mean, my argument, and I think this is backed up by the writings of the founders,
Hmm.
is the fact that it was a check on tyranny. So, in the event that the government becomes tyrannical, you could fight back against it and you could overthrow the government and install a new government. That that's the whole point. These
Okay.
guys just got done fighting a a bloody
A tyrannical
war
government.
that was a tyrannical government who was, you know, stomping all over their rights. Okay. And if you look at it across history, that's always the way it's been. Anytime the government wanted to impede on your rights, on all your other rights, the first thing they did was come for your guns.
Yeah, I know of no situation where, given a significant amount of time period, get that
That
where
hasn't gone poorly. Yeah.
like someone gave up their guns and did not, short of like contemporary governments. But historically, whenever somebody was
Which
disarmed,
contemporary governments?
um, you have like Australia, where they
Australia is
disarmed the population.
a horrible one. That's a horrible, and they haven't completely disarmed the population because people do still have guns and can't have guns.
But
But
it's
I would argue that it hasn't led to the, well, no,
give it
no, you
time.
can make that argument. So here's the deal. They also locked people in their houses and would not allow Australian citizens in or out of the country.
I'm
They
not
built
saying it's gone
detention
well.
camps. And where have we seen that before? Oh, another
Yeah.
government who took everybody's guns
Well,
back in the
and
late
that's
30s, early 40s. Yeah,
but that's my point. Is it contemporary governments haven't had enough time yet.
timeline hasn't been long enough.
Right. And so I'm saying if you look back in history,
Yeah.
when has there ever been a period where disarming a population has not resulted in lots of bad things? I'm genuinely asking if somebody can
I mean, you could.
link to that. Let me know, please. I would love to. It'd be an interesting case study. I actually think that it's more than just tyrannical government. I think it actually has a far more valuable purpose. It's not just a in case of tyranny breaks glass. I think the reality is it's there to break the monopoly on violence. Most governments rely on having monopoly of violence to control the population.
Yeah,
What
basically.
this does is it requires the government to have the consent of the governed.
Sure. Yeah, that I think that is a I think that's a secondary uh oh, losing my mind here. I think that's a secondary
Secretary,
reasoning behind it. But the
perhaps,
main reason I think is to prevent tyrannical government.
sure, and
If
it's
you say that, if you say it that way, then that means keeping government in check because they realize that the population is armed and you don't overstep that bound because they are armed and they will overthrow your government.
sure, and the reason the distinction for me is that it's not like, well, you don't need to have the guns until they become tyrannical. It's no, you need to. It's having the guns at all stages of the process enforces good behavior of the government. The government can't, the police can't step like there was a video of this actually recently where the police were upset with the behavior of a bunch of guys. I think they're out shooting on his property, blowing stuff up, perfectly legal where they were. and they surrounded his property. And you saw them very hesitant to cross the small fences and like gate that was just a bar to go into the property. And it's because there's a lot of them and they're armed.
Hmm.
But I have seen cops in most states, even states where being armed is common, where but maybe not the majority of the people willingly, blatantly violate property rights. Just enter into your property because they claim um what's that where it's like something bad's happening right away. Um
Exigent circumstances.
Accident circumstances. They just like say accident circumstances as they walk over. Like there's no real justification for it. In fact, this is used a lot when there's 911 calls. We have to search the premises because of exigent circumstances. No, you don't. All you have is somebody of unknown origin saying that there's something bad happening here. For all we know, you had your buddy in the cop car next to you call in so that you can make this search.
Right.
There's it's not exigent circumstances, though I think that needs to be argued in court, perhaps. But
It has been, and it's won most of the time.
I think it might
Sadly.
be, yeah. I mean, that's a whole other issue. But you see cops do it. Well, they will blatantly violate your what Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendment
All of the
rights.
above. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, like
and
just
here's the thing,
it's
like
dealer's
in
choice.
reality, that was much less common. It's become more common as of recent. I I think
What?
in what I've been seeing. Now that may
What?
not be the case, but what I find really interesting, which is going to change a whole lot of people's minds, is that the support that the police departments had for a long time, they lost a lot of them lost that over the last couple of years because of how they treated the citizenry.
And I
And people figured out that guess what? They're not there for your benefit and they're not the nice guys that you think that they are. And where you thought for a long time, or a lot of people thought that, yeah, most of the cops are good and there's a few bad apples here and there. Um, I think a lot of sentiment has started to change to where it's like, no, they're all, I'm not going to say they're bad, but it's more of like they're the banality of evil, where they're just they're the foot soldiers of Nazi Germany. Not
right,
actually, okay, let's not get too but in the same sense that they're simply following orders,
like
right?
they're
That's
it's
their
the
response, is
same.
that we are just following orders. I have to do my job. This is what I have to do. I know that it's not right. I don't agree with it. Well, if you don't agree with it, then don't freaking do it.
Right. It's
Sorry.
the same spectrum of the paradigm. Like
Right.
you're not loading people into train cars yet, but you are getting like you're maybe rounding them up for the initial arrest, and they're
Well,
maybe
people don't
they're
talk
giving
about it. The freaking suicide rate at the end of World War II amongst people who had either worked for or collaborated with the Nazis that were just basic foot soldiers. They were just following orders. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any clue. They were just like, oh, well, we're sent here to take these people and help load them on a train. And then they find out that after the war, they're like, oh, I sent all those people to their death, and they couldn't live with it. Like they
yep,
just like self-delete.
yep. No, I mean, and they gave them excuses, but they're weak excuses, and they were a lot of these people they just didn't look too closely because it was inconvenient, and that's exactly what you see with cops.
Well, okay. One, I'm not going to go that far with regards to historical because one, I don't know, and two, information was not as widely available as it is today.
No, and
And
it's
but today, in in today's age of information, ignorance is a choice.
what and
That is
some
an
of
active choice.
and, and at first you're right. It's hard to like you thought you were just sending these people to a camp. Some of the people that went thought they're honestly being you were going to a quarantine camp to get treatment for being I forget what disease they said they
Doesn't
had,
matter.
but um
This is, but that's
well, no, my
immaterial.
point is but later on there were specific. I think it's important. There were specific signs that you could like. There were writings of this where people were talking about how they could have if they knew something was off and they didn't say anything. They could tell this person was not willingly going so much, or even necessarily.
Yeah, but then you're getting into nuance, and I mean, yes, were there occasions of that? I'm talking about in
And
general.
I'm
The
just more just
generality, that's why I didn't want to go off that tangent, because
sure,
that's
but I'm just my point is like there were people that like I was specifically talking about. There were people that saw some stuff that didn't feel right and just stopped there, and this is part of what they were talking about when they killed themselves.
sure.
And and that's what I'm
But
alluding to. Is
that's
like I
different than what this is, because this is very clear. Like you know that you're violating people's rights, one,
yes.
and two, if you like, it's not like there's an
Well,
information that you don't have the information. The information is completely available to you.
I mean
You
it's
just have to go find it, search it out. It's
but
just, I mean, it's a Google search.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I would say yes. There's a greater responsibility on the police now because they can be more informed. But I don't think a lot of them understand where your rights end, and as much as you think they do.
And if that's the case, then they shouldn't be police officers.
There's a strong argument to that. I think there is. It's one thing is if you know as a force they should. It's one thing if you're a junior officer and there's some nuance there, but you should be with a more senior guy that knows the rules. Then
Disagree.
you don't think that.
I think that you should have a younger officer with an older officer whenever you're on due. I disagree with the fact that they don't understand or they shouldn't know when when what those lines are that they can't cross with regards to violating when they're violating somebody's rights or they're not. I
Yeah,
disagree with that.
I think that
But
I
you
think
just
they
said
should
that
be
that
trained.
was
I said it's one thing if like I can understand a junior officer not being there yet, not having that level of understanding because it's nuanced. It's not nuanced. Some of these the lines that we have said violate rights, don't violate rights has some very fine lines. They're very principled, and it's with some studying you can understand the principle, but
okay. They
it's
wouldn't
not.
teach that in the academy?
I don't know that you can learn it just in a classroom. I think you need to learn it by evaluating multiple cases. I don't mean like
Okay.
literal criminal cases. I mean multiple instances of does this violate the law, doesn't it? And
And I think that if you're in that situation, you should always err on the side of making sure that you're not violating somebody's rights.
yeah,
If you think that it's close, right? Because I mean, like what you're essentially what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe this is kind of what you're saying is that you clearly understand part of it, which means that's black, right? No go zone. That's violating
yes,
somebody's rights. You have the white side of it. This does not violate somebody's rights. That's okay.
yes,
And then you have that middle area, that gray area that's in the middle, right?
hmm
Okay. So if
okay,
you're in, so you know what's left side, you know what's right side. If you're in that gray zone, if you either should defer to that this I don't do this because it violates somebody's rights, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would rather be wrong and not violate somebody's rights than be wrong and violate somebody's rights.
no, no I
Right?
think that
That's the way.
is you're
Or
right.
if hopefully, the ideal would be that you would have somebody with you who was a senior officer who had seen that situation before and knew whether that fell on the right hand side or the left hand side of that
Yeah,
line.
right. And I guess that is kind of what I'm thinking more is that we should be tolerant of police officers hesitating to violate someone's rights, even like hesitating to take action that could violate someone's rights, I should say,
Okay.
and instead yielding to more senior officers. And really, there should be some kind of department lawyer on staff at all times to help reel in the police.
Okay.
Right? If there's a question about whether or not you're going to violate someone's rights, shouldn't you have somebody on staff that you can
And
ask for
just
advice?
and let's clarify for the audience. We're not talking about something that happens and breaks down in the middle of a moment, right? Typically,
Right.
you react and do something in that case. And a
Sure.
lot of times that's a restraint of somebody, right? But there are too many. What we're talking about is the vast majority of these things that there is time. I mean, you see times that they violate people's rights where they call in for backup, right? You call in for backup, you wait for backup, you call in for, call in for a superior, you wait for a superior, and nobody stops you from violating these people's rights. And that's a problem. And in
Yep.
that case, like that's an issue.
Well, sure.
But
And
that's
it's
but that's not also that's not on topic.
no,
So
right. No, I think you're right. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that should be how it's handled. Is just a lot more deference towards the existing rights. But kind of getting back to it, I think that if that's how we see the purpose of if the purpose of the Second Amendment is, as I stated, to be a check on the federal government or the state government, any government really,
any
just
government is
government in general,
correct.
then you sort of need to have the same. You need to be able to bring the same level of force that they do,
I mean, that's my theory on it.
right? Like that's sort of the implication is that the same level of force that they would bring to bear upon you, you need to be able to bring to bear, at least in theory, against them. Like whether or not you can obtain the weaponry is up to you.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not necessarily sure that I'm pro people having their own personal nuclear arsenal,
Well,
but I'm not necessarily against it either.
and
Like
that's
I,
and
I
that's
don't think anybody should have it.
and that's kind of what I'm trying to parse together a little bit. Is nuclear weaponry seems very similar because it's the idea of someone being able to take out a city over a dispute with the government, a personal dispute even. Sure,
Okay.
it's expensive to get that, but they could take out a city, and doing so seems extreme. And I don't necessarily that like that's a that seems like a problem. And additionally, there's sort of a natural disincentive for a government to use nuclear weapons on its own territory.
Based on what?
It would be destroying its own territory. It'd be destroying some of the things it values.
Okay. I mean, but you're not saying that they wouldn't do it.
I don't know. And this is kind of the thing is like I if if the purpose of nuclear weaponry is ultimately a deterrent, right? That's why you have them is is a standoff weapon against other nation states for the most part. Really could
Hmm.
be other entities, right?
Whatever. Yeah.
Right, because it's well the difference is kind
I
of moot.
I get it.
The then you would think that okay, well then you need to have a similar relationship. You need to be able to come into a similar relationship with the federal government. Then maybe you should need to get nuclear weapons as well.
Okay.
So
I agree. My premise is, here's my deal. I don't think that the government should be allowed to have any weapons that I can't have. There should be no limitations on what weapons I can have. If the government can have those weapons, then I can have those weapons. You want to make limitations? Then limit what the government can have, and you can limit what I can have. Now, I may
okay,
not be able to order to afford an M1 Abrams or an F-16 or an F-35, right? But
well, but the yeah,
if it comes available and I can, then yeah, I should be able to buy one.
if you need to, if the U.S. government wants to bring that much force to bear on you personally, that you would require you to get those kind of arms, you must have done something to really piss them off.
No,
More
you're no,
likely,
no, no. The
you're
difference is that you're assuming that
hold
it's
on. More likely, is that you're doing this. You have banded together with a group of people, a community of sorts, and that a community mustering the funds to get that might be more reasonable.
Well, I mean, okay, sure. I mean, in today's world, no, there are people who can afford it,
Sure, there are.
right? But the reality is it makes no difference, and there's no reason that a community is probably going to go buy an F-16 or an M1 Abrams. The point is that one, I don't know that anybody really needs or wants, except for just like to goof off with
Sure.
any of those types of things. For me personally, it's that I don't want the government to have those kinds of things. I don't want them to have nuclear warheads. Now, with regards to nuclear warheads, I'm willing to make a certain amount of concessions specifically for defensive use only and to protect against mutually assured destruction and other nuclear powers. Like that I will concede that portion. And
Okay.
if you write that into the Second Amendment, okay, cool.
Sure. How
And
do you?
then, but beyond that, there's nothing else that I think that the government needs to have, like these cluster munitions that we just sent to Ukraine. Absolutely not. I don't want those to see any kind of battlefield ever. They're dangerous, they're dirty, they're horrible weapons. They have a horrible track record of killing lots of civilians because they're indiscriminate. And when they don't go off, then you now have these little bombs that are just kind of laying around everywhere that look like a ball. So what happens? A kid walks by, picks one up, and it goes off. This is not okay. So
No,
yeah, no.
I.
And they need to
What?
and the government like needs to be afraid of its citizenry, not the other way around. I mean, Joe Biden just basically threatened the American public the other day, where he said, "Oh, you think you're going to take on the American government? You might need some F-16s and nukes."
Right, because going to be
Said
willing to
that.
use those things on us.
So if he's going to say that, I'm going to take that as a direct threat. And yeah, okay, at that point, yeah, I
I,
kind of
I
do need those. Yeah,
no, I mean, like I don't know enough about the realities of warfare to say for sure about cluster munitions or anything. They do seem unnecessary as they're currently implemented, and certainly dangerous and massive collateral damage. But it sounds like if someone could properly make the argument for you that you'd be open to that,
properly make what argument?
that they're necessary. They have a
No,
that if
their
some so
failure rate's
someone
too high.
okay, well yeah, and that
If
is
you could improve them to where their failure rate was actually less than 1%, which is what they had to claim in order to send them to Ukraine, and
yeah,
you could prove that, and you could prove a use case for them, then okay. But
sure.
generally speaking, like I don't know of anybody who has a cluster munition that has that kind of dud rate
Yeah, I think this is more of
anywhere
a
in the world.
let's expend them in Ukraine because we have a stockpile and we just want to
They're
destroy
sitting
them.
around and we don't have any 155 ammo to send them, so
We have
here,
them, we don't know what else to do with them. Yeah, no.
we're not allowed to use them. So
Now, but I am curious. I want to get back. You said the limitations on nukes being defensive. Did you have a way of doing that in mind?
what do you mean?
Like enforcing their defensive use only? Are you just saying that'd be written into the
I'd say
Constitution?
you'd write it in. Yeah.
Okay.
Now that doesn't necessarily like it's just words on paper, right?
Yeah,
And they could violate that, but
but you
you'd also
give.
limit the number and the ton weightage or whatever. Like and like you have that you have to have a negotiation and talk about it, right? Like okay, here's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. I mean it's weapons of mass destructions like that in general. I think we need to have a strong conversation about their necessity of existing at all, be it chemical, biological, or nuclear. Too much
See,
of
and
it seems like we're
I see it
developing
as
them
different.
because we want them.
Yeah, chemical. chemical and biological, no. That's a hard no. That's a those are those are sick and twisted, and they are designed to kill a population while leaving um, its treasure, infrastructure, whatever intact. That's the reality of what those are designed for.
Yeah,
And and there's no good reason for them to be in existence.
I'm
We want to
inclined to
be the
agree.
we want to be the world leader. Let's show people that we're the world leader and say, nope, we're not doing this, and actually destroy those.
Sure. If you need to study it for defensive purposes, you can easily turn it into a form that isn't easily weaponized.
Sure. And like there's several options, right? Like you keep a certain amount that's small enough that it can't be weaponized. And maybe you keep that at 3 different locations across the country, across the globe, whatever, to where you can still do research on it. But instead of being able to break into one facility and gather enough up to make a weapon out of it, they'd have to break into 3 or 4 facilities.
Or even just small quantities that is not meaningfully deployable, but you can detect, you can use it to test uh,
Right.
defensive measures,
Sure.
protective measures,
Yeah. And I'm
right?
okay with that. Like, I'm
Sure.
all right with that. Like to protect against that kind of stuff. But like, you have to be careful. You have to,
So it sounds like,
and it has to be in, like I would argue that it needs to be in certified level whatever security facilities, because I think based on Dr. Fauci's email, they were doing gain of function, which is a biological warfare, and were so careless that not only I think did this recent outbreak come from there, but if you go look at the documentation about that facility, they'd been warned and had been cited several times for not following safety protocols. Several. Like, okay, sorry, you can't do this anymore because you've proven, like, this is like handing I mean, you're talking about, like, that's like handing a gun to an 8-year-old who you've never taught anything about guns. Like here, and then not only that, that 8-year-old pulls a negligent discharge, and you go, tisk tisk, don't do that again.
yeah, yeah,
Right? Like that's
no,
that's the equivalent. No, no, no. You've proven that you can't handle this level of stuff. We're gonna have to pull that. You can't do this anymore. The problem is that the gain of function research that they were doing is outlawed specifically by the United States. And so they were doing it in an end around to be able to do the without really doing it.
yeah,
And
that should be criminal.
it is criminal. You
I,
were giving, you were
yeah, I don't know.
allocating and sending funds to do something that was against the law of the country. That's a criminal offense. How Fauci is not in jail, or at least on trial, because he needs to
Yeah,
have a proper trial, but
yes,
how he's not on trial and being arrested for that, I'm not sure.
yeah. Well, I think you and I both know the answer,
I
the
mean,
actual answer. But
right.
okay, but getting to sum up the final topic, it sounds like the limitation that you'd want to put on the Second Amendment is basically no limitations apply to the Second Amendment except those that also equally bind U.S. governments.
Yes. With the carve out of a certain amount of defensive nuclear weapons.
I'm not even sure you need the carve out because whatever, however binding you make those release of nuclear weapons, you could also say that those binds apply to any civilian groups as well.
Sure, but do we really want to have the ability to, because we've already necessi or we've already notated that we agree, I think, that even though we've written the rules down, that the nuclear warheads are only to be used in a defensive manner. They're there for mutually assured destruction purposes. That doesn't preclude the US government from at some point, say, I don't know, 60 or 80 years in the future, doing something different with those, right? Because technically, at the end of the day, they're just words on paper. And so
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't, I don't like the idea of nuclear weapons being in the hands of civilians. They're too indiscriminate and they're too devastating.
Yes.
I don't like indiscriminate weaponry. Can't
And
tell.
I think having that would necessitate the government binding itself in such a way as to prevent that. And I think that would be pretty good.
No, I think you, I mean, maybe I don't understand what you're trying to say because you're saying, it sounds like you're saying the same thing you just said.
I think if you require them, so whatever solution there is to limit the use of nuclear weapons, be it for defensive purposes only or
Okay.
for they'll
Let's pick one premise. Let's go through one scenario. Like let's just say you've decided to write it down that they are for defensive use only. Let's pretend like that's the case.
write it down in the Second Amendment.
Yes.
Right, but I'm okay,
You
I'll
were you
bite.
were going off of like, well, you can say this or you can say that. I'm saying let's be very specific that we say let's like in this hypothetical.
Okay. So you're saying what? I'm confused because
Me too.
I'm saying that though the US government, if you write the limitation as if you wish to bind civilian usage of weapons, you have to bind government usage of the weapons. The government will come to some kind of limitation to prevent civilian use because they don't want civilian use, be that defensive or something else.
Okay. But that still means that civilians can own nuclear weapons in your
Potentially,
scenario.
yes, if
Okay.
the government can.
I right. That's why I say it. That's why I want to carve out.
So except for nuclear weapons, only.
No, no. Too broad a carve out. My carve out is there are the carve out is the government is not allowed to have any weapons that the citizenry cannot have, with the exception that we are going to allow the government to have X number of nuclear warheads for self-defense slash mutually assured destruction purposes only,
Okay.
right? And they should literally, I think, my whole idea behind that is that they should really only be there as a deterrent because unfortunately, some people in this fucking world are crazy as shit. Like
Yep.
there are some, and I'm not saying necessarily even current, but I think in historically there were some regimes who just out of spite or having the opportunity would have launched nuclear weapons against the US and other countries, to be honest, without without regard to what that would have done to the rest of the world, to the rest of the planet, what kind of damage that would have done. But because either they didn't have them or because they knew that the US did, that precluded them from using them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm not sure I
That's
agree
my
with putting. I understand your position. I just don't think I agree with it putting that in as a specific carve out.
that's fine.
I think it should just be more generic and let us figure out something more mutually binding. But
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. And like I can see that. My problem is I don't well, I don't trust people. That's the reality.
yeah,
And
I mean,
it's very difficult like okay, so are you okay with Bill Gates having nuclear warheads? He can afford them.
I
Remember, before you answer, You
I'm
are the
thinking.
carbon that he wants to
I'm
eliminate.
thinking. I'm thinking because
Yeah,
like he also owns most of the farmland. So if I'm near the farmland, he's nuking his own land.
doesn't
But
care. Like
yeah,
you could argue that he doesn't care, like it's worth it.
well, and it's I
And he wouldn't nuke you anyway because he'd nuke major populations. I mean, you
right.
basically would
Well,
expect that DC, LA, that kind of stuff. But even if, let's say that
would it
everybody from
improve
DC
DC?
thought that he was going to blow up DC, so they left DC, and where they go? They went to his farmland because they're afraid that he's going to fire. And you think he won't nuke his own farmland to get rid of the amount of population that he wants to get rid of?
Sure. I mean it's I mostly it's mostly a I'm not putting my faith in people, only their desire not to die. That makes sense. Um, and that I think that I, I'm putting faith that this is a solvable problem. Basically, I
Oh,
don't know what the solution is, but I'm putting faith in the idea that if we set it up where these competing interests align, then a solution will be found.
yeah,
I don't know if that's true, but that is fundamentally what I'm doing.
yeah. I disagree. I don't think that there's going to be a solution that's going to be found. One, I don't think you'll ever get that rewritten to where you truly like straight up limit it like that.
I
Um,
mean,
Now, if the NFA gets overturned, then maybe
we're marching in that direction.
it
We'll
looks
see.
that way. Like there are a lot of decisions that are coming out that it's like, well, if you take A plus B plus C plus D, you add those all together, that equals no more NFA. And you know, that means, you know,
Yeah,
machine guns and silencers for everybody.
I think the lower courts just haven't engaged it yet, but I think it's going
I
to
think,
be.
you know what'll be fun? I expect that there are probably going to be at some point, we're going to get close to that tipping point, and there's going to be a whole lot of backing down by government entities, and they're going to back off a bunch of stuff. And they'll do that because if they back off of it, then the case is moot, which means it never actually gets ruled on by the courts. And so it doesn't ever get, they don't ever get told, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that. I think it'd be a smart thing to do for them. I don't think they're going to do that. They've shown
Oh,
themselves to be.
they've done it before.
When?
Hmm.
Like
I'd have
recently?
to go, yeah, I'd have to go look up some of the cases.
Okay.
But yeah, they
Because
they've actually done that where they're like, you know what?
just concede
Um,
this case because you don't want a negative precedent.
well, they concede the case because they don't want to get ruled against. Because if they get ruled against, that's permanent, or at
Right.
least, especially if it's Supreme Court, then it's real permanent overall.
Yes.
Versus if they just let it go, then they can try to inch by some other direction or change their line of attack a little bit, something like that. And you might be right. They actually may be so, headstrong and believe that they're going to win so much. They may be just delusional
Um,
and they may just march forward. And if they do, it'll be game on.
I just think in
Like
the
it's
last
liable
10
to be real
years,
game on.
in 10 years, especially post COVID, they have gotten a authoritarian boner, and they are higher on their own supply, and I do not
Hmm.
think they have any humility, or I don't think they care about people's rights at all. I don't think they believe in people's rights one bit. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of what those pesky courts will keep them from doing, and I think that keeps them from seeing what's
Yeah,
happening.
absolutely. I mean,
So
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of them, probably the vast majority of them, are blind to what's actually going on and what the implications are if they keep marching towards those deals. My, I almost want to say, like, my fear is that there are a
fear.
couple of individuals who are smart enough and paying enough attention that they're like, maybe we should slow our roll a little bit, because if we continue down this path, where this leads is that we add up these different decisions across multiple courts or multiple
And it's a
cases,
precedent to nerf the NFA.
and then there's no argument against it. Well, like, we're going to argue this. Well, this case supersedes that, so that's done. Okay, next. And so you just dismantle each portion of it. Just
Right. In the last three
it's
Supreme Court decisions, we basically said these three things, which lead us to the clue that you can't do these things. And
right.
that guts the, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think, unfortunately for them, unfortunate for us, the left eats their own. So I do not think that you can, I don't think they allow that kind of
Hmm.
dissent. But we'll see.
Yeah, it just depends on how. What I think will be funny is, I think the NPCs that don't realize how that what that outcome means are going to be the ones that are just absolutely screaming and driving it forward, and like, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this, not realizing that by implementing some of the things they want to implement, what that means is that it's going to get struck down in court, which is going to lose everything that they've earned or gained, or all
Right.
the ground that they've built over the last, I don't know, 50, 100 years,
Yep.
something like that. Like,
Yep.
it's kind of like Oregon and California, who are just continuing to kick forward, and it's like, guys, one of these days, like, you're gonna step
Well, that
on the wrong,
happened.
you're gonna step on the wrong landmine.
That happened in one of, I think it was one of the gun cases. Oh yes, in the ATF frame and receiver case.
Hmm.
The ATF argued, well, we had done similar things before, and the court had said, you doing it previously does not make that doesn't make it right. That just means you violated this before too.
Oops.
And I it's sort of like that you're just more evidence that you're bad at this.
Did you just admit to violating constitutional rights previously in
Right?
court? It's kind of what it sounds like you just said. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I heard.
So hopefully this discussion, the limitations of 2A becomes more relevant.
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's fun that there's really no reason for for the U.S. government to have, or for citizenry to have. Like automatic weapons. Automatic weapons are fun, fully
Yeah.
automatic, but I mean, like,
I mean,
for the
you talking
most part,
mounted machine guns? Or are we talking like fully automatic ARs?
it just depends on the weapon, right? Like,
Yeah.
for the most
Like
part,
full I don't want a fully automatic AR for anything besides fun.
yeah, which is most of what most people could afford, right? Because they're just expensive.
Yeah.
Anything larger than that, let's say that, right? If you wanted to buy a belt-fed machine gun, they're just expensive, right? So it's difficult to do that or justify. You want to get a Gatling gun or a minigun, like, they're just expensive. So the most accessible to the normal population is fully automatic, um, would be a fully automatic type AR rifle, right? Okay. Well, they're just not that, like, one, they're not that useful, and they just tend to waste ammo. Now, they are kind of fun to shoot every once in a while, but, like, not as a
Yeah, I mean,
general rule. Like, you hold
like
that trigger down. I mean, it's okay. We're done.
yeah, you like
Whoops.
we shot a fully automatic MP5
Hmm.
for went rented at the range, right? You can do that.
Sure.
And like, all right, shoot through the magazine and go and empty.
Right.
It was actually a little longer than that, but um
MP5 is a little bit different, and it depends on what the
right. I actually
firearm is, what the rate of fire is, what the magazine that it'll
well,
hold, all
and
that kind of fun stuff. But
there's some arguments for a fully automatic MP5 is for practical uses, but it went through the magazine. We mag dumped and it went very quickly.
Yeah.
And so, like, I could certainly there are tactical cases where specifically an automatic MP5 would be useful, but you need to be disciplined and controlled with it.
Yeah, but I mean, even at that, like how about this? You could make the argument that a lot of people who practice can achieve a rate of fire very similar to an automatic rate of fire without using a semi-automatic weapon.
Yes. Yes.
Like I have met guys who can, like, everybody talks about like the bump stocks, right? Which basically is
Yeah.
just a recoil type deal, which
Right.
it's whatever. But you can do that. Like, if you practice, you can do that using the belt loop on your pants.
I've done it.
Like,
That was
that's a
actually the first
thing,
time.
and people don't realize that. But I know people who can run an AR or an AK properly, who can keep rounds on target and run it that fast without using either of those and without having a fully automatic weapon. Like, if you practice and you're good with your weapon and you're proficient, you can do that anyway. And
Yep.
you're going to be a whole lot more skilled and a lot more precise with it.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
I'm not saying that I don't, like, if somebody wants to have one, fine, whatever. I don't really care, other than the fact that, like, understand that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in 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 practical terms, right? And so,
For the most
like,
part. I mean, there are some niche
I could
uses,
see
but
potentially where the government was like, all right, well, we're not going to allow fully
no
automatic
belt.
weapons anymore. And because, like, the only problem is you lose your suppressive fire on the battlefield.
Well, and that's the thing is like there are suppressive fire aspects of it that are
Mhm.
useful, where you especially if you're retreating, um, and I mean, there's I think most people like there are significant use cases. They're specific. They're not super common where having automatic weaponry is useful.
Sure.
Um, the suppressive fire, there are like tactical spray and pray methods that are not necessarily suppressive.
Tactical spray and pray.
Yep, you're shooting at an
Where did
area
you hear this?
from my mouth. I didn't come up with the term spray and pray. I was being tongue in cheek.
Okay.
But you're shooting at an area. You're not what?
No.
No. This
No, that's
is
just it's indiscriminate. You shouldn't. I mean, like, if you're doing that, that's just suppressive fire.
I wouldn't call it. The intent was not to suppress. It was to more provoke. A lot of the common terms of thought. Shoot an
Okay.
area, get them to return fire, see where they are.
Okay.
But I guess you could probably do that more with
That's
a
not a good
single
idea,
shot.
because then you've now showed them where you are.
It's not common that you want to do that because you do give away your position. But if you think that if you can convince them that if you think they know where you are and you want to convince them that you already know where they are.
I understand, but I mean, like, you're going down like this weird, wild,
Like I said,
off
it was
the
niche.
wall.
There are niche. It's more.
That's
I
not
want
one of
people to
them.
have all of their tools available for them for this sort of thing.
And I'm not saying that people can't have automatic weapons. That's fine.
Oh
If you
yeah,
if you want to have automatic weapons, then just say that you think that you need to have automatic weapons and you want to have them. I'm okay with that argument. The argument that you just made is not a good argument. Let's go with that.
there are niche uses for automatic. You spent a whole bunch
There
of time.
are,
No. You said
but
you
that
spent a
one
bunch.
specifically is not a good one.
I think there's
Suppressive fire, good argument.
yeah, and I said there are others.
Tactical spray and pray is
I'm
not.
big tongue in cheek. It's not. I wouldn't call it this. because it is
Sad day.
spraying. You're spraying and praying, right? You're
No,
praying. Yeah. You
no, no,
what?
no.
No,
Negative Ghost Rider.
no.
No,
You care to explain, or you're just gonna you sit there and
no.
be a
You don't.
shithead?
You should never spray and pray. That's not a thing. Don't like you're talking about just like indiscriminately firing at that point.
Not truly indiscriminately firing, because that is more likely to cause collateral damage than be effective. It's hits by its tongue in cheek. I'm not literally meaning spray and pray.
Please,
I'm
you
invoking.
can't. But you can't. You can't say things like that. People will take that seriously.
And you made a huge argument that we shouldn't have automatic weapons. So,
No, I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm saying that it
but
doesn't
you
make
made the argument.
sense.
You
And
just
I'm
didn't come to that
saying that
conclusion.
no, I I'm saying I don't see a purpose in them, and I see that you might get the potential that the government, in order to keep them out of the hands of the citizenry, would just ban them from government use, which means that would allow them to ban them from citizen use or ownership.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I was saying. Like, I don't, and that's really that really only comes into play, I think, with like the base level type firearms,
Sure.
because bell-fed machine guns, miniguns, stuff like that are too expensive for the average person to own. Now, if you can manufacture them at scale, that might change.
If there's something
But
more available, there's more of a market for them,
if
then
there's
costs
suddenly
might go
much
down.
larger market, which means you can sell more of them, which means you can make them more readily available, that could change. And honestly, like I don't think that anybody would ever actually ban automatic weapons for government use, because there is such a good use case for them with suppressive fire,
And
specifically
other
something like
tactical spray and
like
pray.
the no, no, with like the light machine guns, the MG 249s and stuff like that.
Sure. No, I mean, I think that, like,
I'm just warning that that's a route that they might go down. I don't care. I think it's fun to shoot fully automatic weapons here and there. I don't care to own one. You, like, to
well,
me personally, I can't afford a minigun or a 249, and so like if I could, maybe that would be cool. But hell, I couldn't. I don't. Not that I couldn't. I don't want to afford one, and I don't want to afford to feed it.
that's
Like
that's the
that's
that's
the
the
expensive
real
part,
problem. I mean, it's
right?
it's not. I mean, I want one at least. I think there's a lot of things that can be done to bring the cost down. I think a lot of those are legislation, as we alluded to. But yeah, the ammo, like, it's not so much that, like, when we mag dumped the MP5,
Okay,
that's
that's
9 mm goes,
9 millimeter.
and that went pretty quick. I'm pretty sure most of these mountain machine guns or the squad assault weapon or automatic weapons, sorry, not assault, automatic weapons, that category of weaponry shoots faster,
Yes,
and their bullets are more expensive.
yes.
So
Typically they're chambered in like 5.56, which is I don't know, it's not quite double the price of 9 mil right now, but it's either that or sometimes they're 308,
yeah,
which starts getting more expensive. There's some of them that are 30-06, which gets real expensive. And then you can always go with like the what is it, the Browning, which is 50, and that's
yeah,
real
that's your mount.
expensive.
Your that's has to be mounted.
Well, yeah, but that means that if you could have
Yeah,
those be legal, that means you could now buy the government surplus Humvees with them attached and operational.
I mean, I'm not saying I've thought
Hypothetically,
about overlook
hypothetically.
positions over areas that need to be defended, but I might have.
It's hard to talk when you got a war boner, huh?
No comment.
Yeah, I know. I just said that. You're welcome.
But
yeah, I mean, like that's the deal. Is like I just don't like, and for like to have an AR that's full auto, I don't give a shit. Like I just don't. I'm
Yeah, I'm
okay with
not.
people who have them, and I mean, like if I was to get into something like that, I would be more inclined to do something like what Brandon Herrera has. Like he has a bunch of like oddball, off the wall, strange, like uh, you know, I couldn't even
Yeah,
begin to list all of them.
he
Like
collects some weird
I
guns.
don't want a Dishka. Like I just don't like that doesn't appeal to me. But like the MG42s or I mean like some of the World War II freaking yeah. What is it? The SSPH or I can't even remember
Oh,
right
the
now.
I think it's well, it's the one where it's
Anyways,
actually in a Russian character, and so it's not technically. But yeah,
but there's I
yeah, I know
mean
what you're
like
talking about.
there's a lot of like there's some neat
SSH,
guns that would be cool to have, but
but it's more of a
I'm okay,
novelty
whatever.
sort of thing, and not really a
Right.
functional weapon. Yeah, no,
It'd be fun to take out to the range every once in a while and shoot, but am I willing to like is that the hill I'm willing to die for to die on if I can get everything else that I wanted? Nah, probably not.
I
Because I
mean,
think you can do just as well with semi-auto, and if it keeps the government from, you know, being able to have biological and chemical weapons, yeah, I'm cool. And if I win the lottery, that means I can go buy an F-16. Sweet.
yeah, I mean, keep in mind what you're saying is that you want to be able to have mountain machine guns, Bradleys, F-16s. You just can't have a fully automatic AR.
No, no,
No,
no,
okay,
no, no. I'm not making the argument that that's the case because I think it's either one way or the other. Either they're all automatics are legal, or all automatics are illegal.
right. No, I'm trying to figure out when you say this, the hill you're going to die on. Like, are you saying that you?
To keep automatic weapons available for citizenry.
Um,
Like if I can have a semi-automatic and I can have suppressors without having to deal with a bunch of crap, then if the government's willing to give up their automatic weapons,
oh, I see what you're
let's
saying.
be clear, they're not going to
Yes.
do.
Okay.
You
It
you
was a little.
render you render the A10 Warthog obsolete overnight, and nobody wants that.
Right.
Everybody loves the Burt.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sorry. They're never going to get automatic weapons in general have way too much use case. Just
right,
not automatic ARs.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They tend to
Okay.
be uncontrollable. I
Yep.
mean, it just
Yep. No, it's
I don't think that'll. Yeah, like I said, I don't think that'll ever
the
happen.
problem is
It's going to be
that's
unlikely.
not the automatic weapons most people want to have.
Yeah, but most people can't
Well,
afford. Most people can't afford their groceries, so
yeah,
most of them
that
can just shut up anyway.
that is one way to disarm the population.
Yeah, starve them to death.
You can't afford bullets.
I mean, that was who was that? Chris Rock that put that forth. It's like I
Yeah.
think bullets ought to be $5,000 a piece.
Give me that back.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, people are going broke.